Good evening, everyone. My name is Anati Balintulo. Welcome to the Black Girls Rising webinar. Today we'll be talking about the importance of grassroots environmental education and the importance of climate activism. If you have any questions or comments during the session, please raise your hand or write your comment on the comment section. Feel free to share your thoughts as well on the comments. We will, however, have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation by our guest. Our guest is Thandolwethu Shezi. Thandolwethu Shezi is a master's student majoring in geography and at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She serves as the Energy Justice Coordinator, Global Youth Ambassador at Their World. She also serves as a youth leader of the Presidential Climate Change Commission. Please help me welcome Thandolwethu and thank you for joining us. So Thandolwethu, I'll be handing over to you to present your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. Lovely to meet you and Tanda. So hi everyone. My name is Thandolwethu. Just want to confirm that you guys can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Thandolwethu Shezi, and I'm part of the SAYCCC, which is the South African Youth Climate Change Coalition Secretariat team. And I'll be sharing a presentation with Black Girls Rising on the importance of grassroots environmental education for promoting climate action in rural areas. I have asked CM Tanda to please share the slides on my behalf because we have a lot of connection issues this side. So CM Tanda will be assisting me, and after I finish with the slide, I'll ask her to move on to the next one. So I think we can start with the first slide. Okay, so I'm sure everyone is familiar with the definition of climate change, with it referring to the long-term shifts in climate patterns driven by both natural and human activities, and its global impacts threaten food security, human health, and the socioeconomic stability of people, with our vulnerable populations facing the greatest risks. South Africa is highly dependent on agriculture, and our agricultural systems actually are very sensitive to climate variability because we rely so much on rain-fed agriculture. So the existing inequalities that we have in our country that contribute to poverty, inadequate infrastructure, and the socioeconomic challenges that people face are actually exacerbated in the experience of climate change, because the marginalized communities find it hard to cope with the constant disasters that accompany climate change. So grassroots environmental education actually empowers local communities to take action by creating awareness and also understanding of the environmental issues that they might face in their communities, but also it promotes sustainable practices through hands-on learning and having the community actually be involved. So some of the key climate change impacts that we see in South Africa. Please switch to the next slide, sorry. Can you hear me, Siam Tanda? Okay, no, the one before that. It's the one on climate change impacts in South Africa. So it's before that one. Okay, thank you. So what are the climate change impacts that we're seeing in SA? The rising temperatures that we're experiencing globally are increasing the incidences of heat waves, which are a threat to outdoor workers, human health, and livestock, and negatively impact our agriculture. But also climate change is increasing the seasons of droughts in our country, leading to water shortages and poor crop yields. But also the availability of drinking water is reduced. but it also impacts the species richness and biodiversity hotspots in our country, meaning that our country's ecosystems are also impacted by this. And when we're experiencing more of these frequent heavy rainfall events, such as the ones that are happening in KZN and Eastern Cape, the flooding that happens actually damages infrastructure and displaces communities. But when it comes to climate change, it actually disproportionately affects vulnerable communities, meaning that the effects of climate change aren't necessarily equal, especially when it comes to women and especially people in rural areas who will find it hard to rebuild and basically cope with climate change issues and impacts because of the limited resources that they already have. Next slide, please. So I'll also go into now the legacy, challenges, and diversity of our rural areas, where I basically looked at how the homelands policy that was passed during apartheid forced Black South Africans into economically poor areas where they lost their citizenship and political rights. And even though the system ended all those years ago, the effects of it, like poverty, lack of infrastructure, and social inequality, still hold back development in these places. So while there has been some progress in these places, it's still mainly underdeveloped. So they inevitably struggle with poor infrastructure and limited access to proper healthcare and educational infrastructure, and the fact that there's very few jobs in those areas. And because the government hasn't necessarily invested a lot into those places, these communities find it hard to develop and thrive on their own. But these rural communities are also diverse. We're not dealing with just homesteads alone. It's also commercial farms that exist here, but also small subsistence farming settlements that exist there. So the regions vary in terms of the population size, the land ownership, and economic conditions there. So there's over 19 million people living in our rural areas in South Africa. So it's important for us to be focusing on creating policies that address their specific needs of these different communities in rural South Africa. So climate change is also a threat multiplier in these areas. Meaning that it intensifies the already existing challenges in rural SA. So we have the issue of already limited water access in these places, and they're further strained by climate change, leaving millions of people in these places without access to proper and clean water, right? So erratic rainfall and rising temperatures worsen the agricultural struggles that they already experience and limit their crop yields and also increase food insecurity in rural areas. But outside of that, we also have the issue of veld fires or forest fires that happen in these communities, which means that people that rely mainly on finding economic opportunities from foraging in forests for roots, for any other products that they are able to sell for money are also affected by that, but also their lives are at risk because their homes might burn down during these veld fires. So then it brings us to the case of the climate change child in rural South Africa, which is the next slide. So children already are very vulnerable to climate change because they rely so much on adult care. And if their household resources are already limited, it further exacerbates the impacts that they'll face during because of climate change, because they already have these limited resources at home. So climate change actually exacerbates health risks for children, meaning that there's a higher risk for malnutrition if food insecurity becomes a real problem in those communities. And limited access to nutritious food also stunts their growth, leading to developmental delays. And when we have this issue of rising temperatures and erratic rainfall, it creates conditions that increase the spread of diseases in those areas, especially when it comes to drinking water, where people are forced to now drink from rivers and places with unclean water because they need that resource. And because the young people's immune system are still developing, they're more susceptible to illnesses, which can severely impact their health. And extreme weather frequently disrupts schooling in these areas. Not only does it affect the school infrastructure, but it also affects the home infrastructure. And it's difficult to bounce back from that when your home is already made from materials that aren't the set national standard that would be more more adapted to the changing climate in a sense. So because of this, children miss out on school, leading to long-term educational setbacks and reduced opportunities for them to even create a life for themselves and find employment in the future. So then there's this combined effect of poor health, disrupted education, and also the psychological stress of having to deal with all of these compounding issues that are increased by climate change, limits these young people's potential and perpetuates and increases the cycle of poverty in these areas, and further puts them into socioeconomic inequality in SA. So the reason behind this is the fact that there is a disconnect between government legislation and these rural areas. So what happens is that the government of South Africa has wonderful policies and laws that they've passed on climate change and environmentalism, not environmentalism, but are environmentally related, such as the National Climate Change Response White Paper, the climate change bill that has been recently passed, NEMA, which is the National Environmental Management Act, and NEMA, which deals with biodiversity, and the National Disaster Management Act as well. But however, these policies are not reaching the people that need them the most. And one of the reasons behind this is the fact that they are made without actually consulting the people on the ground and offer more of a top-down approach, meaning that they tell the people what their issues are and how they're going to fix them, but without actually consulting the people and knowing what they need. So it makes it difficult for local people and rural communities to actually connect with these policies and be able to know how to use them. And oftentimes when they pass these policies and laws, they forget that these rural areas don't even have the proper infrastructure needed to follow and apply these different policies that they're setting and strategies that they're using. So it makes it harder for them to actually carry out the programs that are being suggested and put forward to fight against climate change. So even though these policies cover climate action, sustainable farming, and conservation, many people don't even know how to use them. And so these policies aren't being utilized to their maximum in South Africa. So this brings us to why it's so important for us to have grassroots environmental education. So grassroots environmental education is basically a learning process that enhances knowledge and awareness about the environments and the challenges that exist in our environment. And then it also equips people with the skills needed to deal with these challenges, and also creating a mindset shift and an attitude shift in people's communities, and making them make sure that they're able to commit to making responsible decisions when it comes to taking action in their environments. So UNESCO defines it as environmental education as the interdisciplinary, lifelong process that promotes environmental protection. And by promoting environmental protection and having people actually be involved in safeguarding their environment, it not only safeguards the natural physical environments, but it safeguards the communities as well, because if the environment is thriving, the people are able to thrive as well. So environmental education is crucial for building a deeper understanding of climate change as well. And also it's the impacts of climate change, and also helping people recognize the importance of using sustainable practices in addressing the environmental issues that they are facing currently. So it plays a key role in also empowering people with the knowledge and the skills necessary to take meaningful action, and making sure that they are actually being contributors and not being told just what to do, but their voices are actually being taken into consideration. So there's different levels of environmental education. The first one being the formal one, which is delivered through universities and schools, like we experience it as young people. I'm assuming all of us are educated and are getting our education. And then there's non-formal education, which basically is conducted through community-based programs, workshops, and awarenesses, and they're targeted to specific groups such as farmers and local traditional leaders. But there's also now the rise of informal education, which is basically learning through unorthodox environments such as media, social networks, which is something that I also didn't really know how to utilize at first, but I've have had the privilege and just the sheer lack of being able to collaborate with people from all around the, not all around the world, but people from outside of South Africa to produce content that is somewhat global and everyone can understand where we're coming from. And so it also contributes to us having a broader understanding of environmental issues in our everyday lives and being able to relate to people outside of just our surroundings. So it makes the world so much smaller and we're able to learn from each other from different parts of the world. So these different levels of environmental education actually create a comprehensive approach to environmental knowledge and the skill sets that people have in those areas. So grassroots environmental education has the ability now to then mend the legislative disconnect, meaning that the education then becomes becomes a key to engaging local communities in a way that directly connects to them, and especially in their lived experiences. So it's no longer just a top-down approach, it's a bottom-up approach. It focuses on community involvement and making sure that their actions are impactful and are actually fruitful. So grassroots environmental education not only shares information, but it also plays a key role in turning those policies that we spoke about into real world actions. And an example of this is how we are in the age of following the just transition framework and saying that we want to use more renewable energy resources. But what happens in a rural setting is the fact that people don't even have access to energy or even understand that concept in a sense. Some do have somewhat of an idea, but it's about saying that if we're speaking about this, we should be actually working with the communities on the ground and not just focusing on a macro, larger scale, but at a micro scale, and saying that let's try and teach communities about basically how to build or maintain these renewable energy technologies such as solar panels or harvesting wind for energy. And then so this basically helps us ensure that the climate policies that we're discussing and promoting are applied at a grassroots level. Next slide, please. So environmental education also has the potential to now emphasize the importance and the wealth there is in Indigenous knowledge systems. So that's basically looking at how if we include Indigenous knowledge systems, it helps communities use practical and traditional methods to deal with climate change. And these methods can range from something like managing water, rotating crops, and handling fires. And they're practices that are basically passed down from generation to generation, and they're best suited for those different places because of the experiences of the people that have been inhabiting that land. So it focuses on solutions basically that are connected to the land and local resources and helps communities to also protect and preserve their culture and traditions and not just take any information that we find from textbooks and whatever's happening around the world and just see how important it is to recognize the importance of what we have experienced as a people and what we know as well, and taking that and using that as our best practices and being able to share them with everyone else that's outside of our country, outside of our local surroundings. And then it also brings us to the importance of being able to communicate these different environmental topics and climate change in local languages, because I believe that learning in your local language makes it so much easier to basically understand the different concepts. So by combining traditional knowledge and modern science, this approach helps communities create solutions that are specific to their needs and also that preserve their culture. Okay, so you've moved on. Okay, so the topics that can be explored from my perspective is looking at how we can help reduce alien invasive plant species in our rural areas, which is also becoming a problem with grazing areas now being overtaken by alien invasive plant species in parts of KZN. So it's looking at basically raising awareness about the impact of these invasive plant species on local ecosystems and how to spot them, and then basically saying that we have solutions for how you can remove them as well, not only to just protect you because of the different allergies that they might bring and the different diseases that they might carry, but also protect the ecosystem and the livestock that is those people have in those areas, but also looking at how we can teach people about rainwater harvesting if that's not already a community program that's running there, and how to efficiently store water and enhance their water availabilities, especially during drought seasons. But also looking at climate adaptation plans that relate to agriculture, that look at basically adopting resilient farming practices, teaching people about drought-resistant crops and crop rotation, and how to basically conserve their soils so that they can adapt to the changing climate that we're experiencing. But also looking at how we can engage people on waste management. And because we already know that service delivery is an issue in those areas, why not teach people how to basically recycle, how to recycle, and what exactly to recycle, and how they can actually create job opportunities for themselves for that, while also protecting their environments. And then lastly, it's so important that we engage people on disaster preparedness, educating them about what's currently going on and what to expect when it comes to the climate change impacts that we're going to feel that are weather related, and looking at how we can build disaster preparedness plans for those people, and promote more resilient infrastructure in those communities so that they're able to withstand natural disasters and they're not left behind. Next slide, please. So a lot of your media right now is probably filled with a lot of these climate change disasters. So I just took a few screenshots of a couple of them and looked at how in KZN we've been experiencing flooding, but this flooding is not only just the rain and people, there's flooding and we're inundated with water. It also affects the geohydrological processes, meaning that we have the issue of now sinkholes and landslides. And when it comes to rural areas, that's a serious issue, because a lot of those places, when they're given to people to build, there's not actual what can I say, follow up in terms of the policies that are put in place, like the Spatial Land Use Management Act, which looks at basically how to use the land and where to build and where not to build. And so all of those laws aren't necessarily followed, and there's no one that's actually following up on who's getting placed where and what are the risks of getting placed there. And then we also have the issue of, we can have these disasters happen, but then what happens when you have someone that is injured and we're failing to even be able to provide services such as sending an ambulance into that place, and people end up dying waiting for ambulances. And then looking at also how small scale farmers are bearing the brunt of these natural disasters, and how drought and floods are affecting them in their smaller homesteads. And then looking at how veld fires aren't necessarily just affecting the natural environment, but it also leads to the loss of lives. And then looking at rare weather occurrences such as snowstorms that have happened in KZN and the 2 tornadoes that struck us last year. It's all of these things that are making us realize that we're not just speaking about climate change from textbooks and just what's happening around the world. We're actually living through it, and therefore we need to be actively adapting to it and ensuring that people are aware about it as well. So how can we involve communities? Next slide, please. So we can conduct community workshops to raise awareness and basically educate families about climate change and its impacts, and instill a culture of sustainability and also in those families and those communities as well. We can also support community-led climate action projects such as tree planting, water conservation. And when it comes to tree planting, we're promoting indigenous plants mainly being planted. And then looking at also it can also strengthen community bonds and enhance local resilience. But also we're looking at having NGOs and these different entities not working in silos, having them collaborate and leverage their different expertise to make sure that these communities gain as much as possible from the different programs that they instill. And then also creating channels for them to have a voice and not have it be that it's just that we're giving them all of this information, but they're actually part of decision-making processes that happen in our country and in their communities. So on the next slide, I basically just looked at the different engagements that I've done as part of SAYCCC at a grassroots level, where I've been able to be part of protests that were about oil and gas that was hosted by SATSIA, which is a South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, but also looking at in my own community that there's this huge issue of illegal dumping. And the issue with illegal dumping is that if you're living in a rural area like I am, the waste gets carried on down the river stream and it impacts the ocean. So it's about saying if we're educating people about environmental, the challenge that we're facing, we're not just speaking and not actually doing anything. So I've been able to partner with different people from my community to ensure that we have this running project to basically combat illegal waste and also promote environmental education, especially in the growing peri-urban areas in KZN where I'm located. And then I've also had the I've also had the experience of visiting some of the places in KZN that were recently affected by the February floods, and it was mainly the issue of landslides in these areas. And because it is a peri-urban area, I do believe that the correct scoping of these areas wasn't done in a sense because it is a traditionally led area. So there's also that issue when it comes to people are able to purchase land and find these areas where there's not enough tests being done on which places are vulnerable, which places are not vulnerable, and what are the different types of risks that people are exposed to. So that leads to the death of people in both cases where I visited. And it's a shame because it's something that could have been avoidable had there been enough follow up and just engagement between government and the traditional leaders and these communities as well. So SAYCCC on the next slide is basically a youth-led outreach program and NGO where we focus on advocating for climate justice and raising awareness about the impacts of climate change on communities, and especially when it comes to young people. So the coalition works with various stakeholders, including government bodies, NGOs, and also international organizations to create a unified approach to climate action. So we're bringing local stories to an international stage as well. So it's not only that we're taking from them, but we're also bringing our stories as well and making sure that young people have a voice as well. In the next slide, I also highlighted some of the grassroots actions that we're involved in, which is obviously the march that I had previously mentioned, and also the fact that we hold dialogues as well, depending on when we can find speakers and how free our network is. We've also been involved in COP, which is a conference of parties, and host workshops with our university students. So we're not only just speaking to people on the grounds, we're bringing that information to government as well by engaging in whatever youth-led conversations and conversations that they have. So yeah. So one of the proudest things that we have as part of the SAYCCC is the fact that we've been able to create a junior council with a rural area here, a rural municipality here in KZN on the next slide. Where we basically partnered with Ulundi municipality to create a junior council of students, high school students in 2023. And the workshop that we held there basically looked at environmental education and promoting awareness of climate change and the environmental challenges that they face, and also developing the young people's leadership skills as well. So we hosted discussions and created group activities for them to take part in, and also had them do presentations for us, and we also shared some presentations for them. So it's not only just that we're giving them information, but they're also telling us what's happening on the ground and what they're experiencing. So the council has been active for 2 years, and what's great about it is the fact that we were able to collaborate with the local government there to ensure that it's not just something that's something that happens on the side and no one really pays attention to it, but it's also making sure that these young people are taken seriously by their local government, and their opinions are taken into consideration. So some of the commitments that we made as part of the Ulundi Junior Council on the next slide is the fact that we need strong capacity building for these young people. So they work together to raise awareness about climate change and the societal issues that they face. A waste management program was established with them where they prioritize waste management and request the municipalities to support them for cleanups in their neighborhoods. And then we also looked at the issue of food security in that community as well, where we wanted to combat the issue of food insecurity and poverty through community gardens, which promote and prioritize food security in those areas. And also looking at how we can involve the just transition framework and saying that we piloted a project with them that focuses on solar power being provided and having it be something that they can actually physically see and not just hear about it and, not really be able to see it working in their own communities. So it makes it less out of reach and makes it a practical solution for them as well, and a real solution for that community as well. So basically the vision behind that junior council was to create a healthier, more sustainable community supported by the local leaders and organizations. And it was basically to help create opportunities for young people in those areas. Yeah, my presentation is done. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. I'm waiting on my host to.
Thank you, Thandolwethu. So,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, I'll be now opening the question and answer session. So, if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand or write your question on the comment section.
It doesn't have to be a question. You can just comment and also just share about your experiences. When it comes to climate change as a young person and what you've seen in your community. So, yeah.
Okay, fine. I'll start with the question.
Okay.
Okay, how can people include climate education into their everyday life?
I think, if anything, a lot of the climate education the climate conversation is focused on these huge policies that people can't apply to their everyday lives. So it's in things such as practicing proper waste management, because waste is also an issue where landfills are contributing to also the greenhouse gases that are being emitted. So it's about practicing those waste management at a local and household level, but also just learning about how to protect yourself in terms of if you have a disaster, things such as that, and also like learning normal energy saving processes that the government also promotes, such as saving power, and also just learn how to also engage in proper water management strategies as well at a home level. So it's things like that that people can use at a not a local, but a home level, and also educating your family about climate change and why it's important for them to be part of a conversation as well.
Thank you. The last question. Can you please give us advice to young women who are looking to work as climate advocates?
Okay, so my advice is it's important for you to engage with the content a lot. It's important for you to also find an organization that you can work with to learn from those people, like I have, because when I was doing my undergrad and my honors degree, I didn't really understand where I could possibly apply the knowledge that I've learned. So having found an organization now with SAYCCC, it just makes it so much easier to know what my strengths are and what I can focus on. So my advice would be to find a mentor or find people that you can learn from, and then also engage with the content a lot, and then not be afraid to start your own thing as well if you can't find an organization, because it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you don't really understand the content that much. It's what matters is that the fact that you care about it and that there's something that you can do about it at a local level. Like, for instance, with me, I might not have all the resources that I need right now to run a project, but we're able to do community cleanups in my local community. So it's things like that. It's saying that in the little efforts that you can, start with something, and, it'll build from there and your community will find you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else with questions or comments, or you can share your thoughts?
Given the devastating floods in KZN, how do we create a sense of urgency around climate action without including fear or hopelessness in rural communities? I think, if anything, it's about showing people that there are ways to. It's learning from the practices that are outside of SA, meaning that it's as much as we can share about the scare that comes with the climate change disasters. We can also share about the hope and the different ways that other communities have been able to survive. Because yes, the losses are there, and yes, this has happened, but there is a way for us to survive and get through it. But I also think it's about saying that. If there are these disasters, it's important for us to then make sure that they are fine. The recovery process for these people are financed, and that it's not a thing of that you'll experience this, your home will get lost, or you lose a loved one, and that's the end for you. So it's about saying that we offer support as a community as well, and the fact that the strategies that are currently being put into place are working in other communities. So it's about learning from them and sharing that hope of success stories from other communities. Good evening, everyone. Great webinar today. Thank you, Thando. And I have one question. How does one also participate in workshops or campaigns? I'm really interested in hands-on work. Black Girls Rising, would you like to take that? I can also share from an SAYCCC perspective. With SAYCCC, we do have a program that we're running right now with Climates, where we allow anyone who'd like to discuss a topic, and we'll be able to connect you with an NGO that is interested or that focuses mainly on the topic that you'd like to explore, so that you'll be able, someone shared it, okay, so that you'll be able to host your own webinar as well. Because I think it's not great to basically hog the spotlight when it comes to the conversations that we're having right now. So we love to give people opportunities that are interested in being part of climate action and being part of these workshops. And then our workshops right now, we mainly are working with other NGOs because we are understaffed and we are underfunded as well. So we just tag along with other NGOs, and I guess Black Girls Rising is that tag along for us today. Yeah.
Okay, so to join Black Girls Rising, you have to apply online. They will send application letters online at the latest in December for January, and then they take children from 9 to 11 years old. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I really wish I knew about Black Girls Rising when I was a kid, because you guys are doing amazing. I really would have loved to be part of something like this when I was younger.
You can unmute yourself, the one on top with the hand. And you can also ask the question.
Hi everyone, how are you?
Hi, Lua.
Hi.
This is Ulwa. This is Ulwa. Just want to add, like, not necessarily add, but to just highlight the point to Thando made, especially on indigenous knowledge system, like how crucial it is, because Ama traditional practices have long sustained rural areas, it will be like beneficial to kind of like explore ways of combining modern scientific ways with ways that have been used before, because I feel like people who've been in those areas, they know the land better, and if you don't ask them, then what exactly are you doing for them?
Thank you for that, Lua.
Is there any more questions? Anyone? It seems like that's all. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that's all. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this webinar. We have webinars and will inform everyone who registered of our next webinar. If you want to receive updates of our next webinars, you can share your email in the comment section. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
It was
Bye.
nice to meet you. Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.